Hey there, welcome to Smite Guides, where I cover everything there is to know about your favourite gods in a concise and easy to follow format. Today we're covering the suck machine himself, Baron Samedi. This might be a slightly longer one since Baron is viable in 3 roles, so here's what I'm going to cover in the guide. So to kick it off, we'll discuss a little bit about Baron's basic playstyle to let you decide if he's a god you want to learn and invest your time into. After that, we'll cover his abilities in depth, what they do, and the best ways to use them. Then items and builds, where I'll discuss starting builds, my favourite items for Baron, and a full build example. And finally, we'll round it out with some tips and tricks to really push your game to the next level on Baron. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's start with Baron's basic playstyle. So Baron is a mage, but he plays very differently compared to a lot of others that you might have played. He's more focused on utility and supportive aspects like CC and team buffs than pure raw damage. This gives him a very distinct and unique playstyle that personally I find super fun to mess around with. Due to his focus on these supportive aspects over damage, his premier roles right now are solo and support, but we will also cover his viability in mid throughout the guide as well, so no matter where you want to play him, this video has you covered. If you're into those unconventional mage picks and very good suck, then you'll probably love Baron. Alright, so let's move on to covering Baron's abilities in depth and his ability leveling order. So first up, Baron's passive, Hysteria, is a 2-parter. The simple part is that Baron and his teammates get access to a refilling multi-potion chalice called Baron's Brew for 150 gold. This is usually worth picking up on most gods if they can afford it at the start of the game, since it's the same price as 3 multi-potions and also refills itself. The second part of Baron's passive is a little bit more complicated. Essentially, Baron's abilities and basic attacks apply stacks of Hysteria to enemies. This stacks up to 70 times, 2 stacks from a basic attack, and his abilities also apply a larger amount per hit. Enemies at a maximum 70 Hysteria will take 20% additional damage from Baron. This includes abilities, basic attacks, and item effects. Also, Baron's abilities apply additional effects on hit if the target enemy has above 30 Hysteria. We'll cover these effects as we cover the rest of his abilities, just know that this passive is weaved into the rest of his kit. So Baron's first ability, Vivid Gaze, allows Baron to fire 2 beams of magic out in front of him. The beams originate from the 2 sides of Baron and cross paths where he's aiming where he casts the ability. The targeter is a little different to your normal targeter, so just take a look at me using it here to get a feel for it. Enemies hit by both beams will take 15% bonus damage on top of the regular damage. And here's his passive coming in. If enemies hit by this ability are above 30 Hysteria, their power and attack speed are also reduced. This does 60 up to 240 base plus 60% scaling in damage plus that 15% bonus if you hit both beams. The attack speed and power reduction are both 30%, and the ability applies 10 Hysteria for his passive for each beam. So 10 or 20 if you hit both beams. This ability has a 9-second cooldown regardless of level. So that's a lot of words, but this ability is super simple in concept. Once you get the targeter down, it's actually easier to hit than it looks. Plus the cooldown is super low, making it great for clearing and poking in the early levels and even into late game teamfights too. Alright, on to Baron's second ability, Consign Spirits. Baron targets a circular area on the ground, and after a short wind up, enemies in the area take damage and their spirits are channeled to heal Baron and his allies nearby the explosion for a flat amount plus 12.5% of their maximum health. If an enemy god in the area is above 30 Hysteria, the healing spirits will also cleanse slows and increase the movement speed of Baron and his allies affected by them. This ability does 70 up to 290 plus 70% scaling in damage, heals for 40 up to 140 base and 10% scaling plus the 12.5% missing health, and applies 20 Hysteria to targets per hit. This ability's cooldown scales down from 15 seconds to 11 seconds based on rank. So this is definitely one of Baron's best abilities. Not only does it do decent damage, it heals for a huge amount once you rank it up and has a relatively low cooldown, plus the ability to cleanse slows and give your entire team 25% movement speed is just ridiculous. It is worth noting that the delay on hitting it is actually pretty lengthy, so you may need some CC or to lead your shot a little bit to land it consistently. Onto Baron's 3, Wrap It Up. Baron throws his snake at his enemies, stopping at the first god hit and doing damage over 2.5 seconds and applying a ramp to root, which basically just means they get slowed more and more and more until it eventually ends in a root. If the god hit is above 30 Hysteria, the snake will spread and apply the effects of the ability to nearby enemies as well. This deals 5 ticks of damage at 10 up to 42 plus 5% scaling each, for a maximum damage of 50 to 210 and 25% scaling. The ramp to root lasts the full 2.5 seconds, with the first 1.75 seconds being the ramping slow and the last 0.75 seconds being the root. This ability applies up to 40 Hysteria if all ticks of damage are hit and also has a 14-second cooldown at all ranks. So this ability is super obnoxious with the 2.5 seconds of CC. It doesn't cripple though, so people can jump away from this, and the damage is kinda low, so you're mainly using it to set up your 1 and your 2 or the rest of your team's abilities. Since your 1 and your 2 on their own can be a little bit difficult to land sometimes, you could just root them with this and you basically can't miss them. It also applies a huge amount of Hysteria at 40 over 2.5 seconds, so if you do land this on someone, wait out until the root until you fire your 1 and your 2, since you'll get the 30 Hysteria bonuses like reducing their power and cleansing slows. And finally, Baron's ultimate, the Suck Machine, Life of the Pie. allows Baron to leap onto his coffin, pulling all enemy gods in a cone in front of him towards the coffin, dealing damage every 0.33 seconds and applying 5 Hysteria per hit. Once an enemy reaches the coffin, they take a burst of damage and are stunned for 1.5 seconds and the ability ends. If no enemy reaches the coffin after 3.5 seconds, the ability ends anyway. If the target god or gods are above 30 Hysteria, they are pulled much faster towards the coffin. The tick damage portion of this ability deals 17 up to 45 base and 6% scaling per hit, but keep in mind that's happening 3 times a second, so it does add up. And the burst damage when a god hits the coffin is 100 up to 380 plus 50% scaling plus 15% of the target's total health. This applies up to 50 Hysteria with the tick damage and applies maximum Hysteria to any enemy that hits the coffin. Baron may move while channeling, but only at 40% of normal speed, and he'll also take 35% reduced damage for the duration. So this ability is super insane for team fighting or even in a 1v1 scenario. The damage is absurd, and the 1.5 second stun easily sets up the rest of your kit, plus the enemy you're hitting will be at max Hysteria after they hit the coffin, so they take that 25% bonus from your passive. It is possible for enemies to escape this by jumping away or using CC immunity, so be aware of that. Try to burn someone's jump first, maybe by using your 3 before you use this. The pull speed is near unstoppable on a god that has above 30 Hysteria though, so you can sometimes catch people out with this. Also, enemy tanks will probably try and face tank the stun and damage to end the ability early so their team don't suffer the effects. So you can kind of do a little trick with like turning away from them to kind of select which target you want to hit the coffin. Alright, so now we know what his abilities do, let's move on to a leveling order for Baron. So since Baron plays like 3 roles, the leveling order is a little different for mid than solo and support. So level 1, mid and solo take Vivid Gaze, since the cooldown is super low and it allows you to clear as fast as possible. For support, take Consigned Spirit, since the heal is much more valuable in a duo lane scenario. Level 2, mid and solo take the 2 and support takes the 1. Level 3, you usually want to take Rapid Up no matter the role, since the CC is super strong and it sets up for the rest of your kit, but it's sometimes worth it to level the 1 or the 2 again for more damage. Level 4 for mid, take another point in Vivid Gaze, solo and support take Consigned Spirits, and level 5 take the ultimate no matter what, it's super OP. From there, mid levels the 1 first, then the 2, then the 3, and solo and support level the 2, then the 1, then the 3. And no matter what the role, take points in the ult whenever you can. Alright, so with his abilities covered, let's move on to talking about Baron's item choices and builds. So since Baron is viable in 3 different roles right now, the items he builds and the relics he uses will differ depending on whether you're playing him solo, support, or mid. So here are some timestamps to the item section for each role if you want to just learn about a specific role you want to play him in. Alright, so starting off with solo lane Baron, which in my opinion is his best role right now. Solo Baron plays much like a warrior or a guardian from solo rather than your typical mage. You'll be wanting to build tanky with plenty of CDR and some utility, relying on your base values rather than scaling and staying alive long enough to spam your cooldowns in fights. So for a solo lane starting build, right now Guardian's Blessing is definitely the way to go for Baron. This might change in the future, in which case maybe Warrior's Blessing or Mage's Blessing would be better for him, but right now Guardians is the best choice. Just make sure you avoid last hitting minions in the early game, and this item provides you a ton of free gold once it evolves, plus some sustain for missing last hits. From there, you usually want Health Chalice and Tier 1 boots so you can rush boots early, and the Chalice plus blue buff gives you plenty of sustain, especially combined with your 2. Though if you do want a little bit more mana sustain, you can also go Baron's Brew and 3 health pots instead. For your relic, you almost always want TP on Baron. You could make some argument for something like Shell, but TP really helps out your weak early laning phase a lot and allows you to back early, buy full boots and TP back without losing much farm. Plus, once you upgrade it, it can be really powerful for making rotations later on into the game. Speaking of boots, Baron's boots for solo are a matter of preference really. Personally, I prefer CDR boots since I value the 10% CDR and extra mana over the 10 pen. Combine that with blue buff and you have 20% CDR and near infinite mana super early, which is really good. But pen boots are definitely viable if you do want more damage. From there, Baron's build path for solo is reasonably straightforward. Your second item in solo should always be some defense against your lane opponent. Against the physical, you want Breastplate of Valor usually. It gives some great defenses against both the laner, minions and towers as well, maybe even the jungler. Plus, combining CDR boots with the breastplate and blue book gives you full CDR super early. If you're against a magical laner, you usually want Voidstone, since it gives stats that are all super useful for Baron, with some damage, some pen, some defenses and some health. But against a heavy healer like Hell or Ra, you will want to get Pestilence for the anti-heal. From there, you need to build against the enemy comp. If you need more physical defense, your go-to should be Lotus Crown since it gives good stats and you can activate the passive on multiple team members with your 2 quite easily. Spirit Robe and Mantle of Discord are both great for general purpose defense against all types. I tend to lean towards Mantle over Spirit Robe, but both can be good. Magi's Blessing is somewhat worth a pickup if you're getting focused by heavy CC. Baron can have a hard time dealing with being chain CC'd, especially if your ult is down, so this can help out if you feel you need it. Also, Urchin is decent if you're ahead and build it early enough. It gives really great stats for the cost, but of course it requires stacking and is a little more of a risky pickup. If you're having trouble with auto attack characters, Megardian Mail is worth a pickup, and the last defense item I'd recommend is Genji's Guard if you need more magical and don't want pestilence. So there's also a few more damage oriented items that are worth a pickup in solo in my opinion. Though don't go crazy with these as you need to be very tanky to survive being focused in fights. I usually only go for one damage item maximum on solo lane Baron. Spear of the Magus is good only if you don't have another mage that wants to use it. So if you have an Anubis in mid for example that will certainly buy this, then don't bother getting it. But if you're the only good spear user on your team, it can work really well to boost your own damage and also boost your other mage and guardian's damage. Ethereal Staff is a sort of hybrid item since it gives decent damage and also some CCR, which is super useful for Baron since CC is his biggest threat. And finally, Soul Reaver is the last damage item I would recommend. This is very aggressive though and is best if you're super far ahead and want to snowball. Personally, I prefer E-Staff to Soul Reaver on Baron. Alright, so here's a full build example for solo lane for those who just need a quick workable build while they learn. Start with Guardian's Blessing, Tier 1 Boots, Health Chalice, and Teleport as your relic. Finish your boots into Shoes of Focus, then get Breastplate of Valor against a physical laner or Void Stone against a magical laner. Then get the other one in 3rd slot. Then get Lotus Crown, Mantle of Discord, Ethereal Staff, with your second relic being Shell. This build gives full CDR without the need for a blue buff, decent amounts of both defenses but skewed towards physical, some decent damage with Void Stone and Ethereal Staff, and also some CCR from the E-Staff as well. Of course, feel free to sub in items from the ones I listed earlier if you feel like you need them in the current match. Alright, moving on to Support Baron. So if you watch through the solo lane build section, Support Baron builds a lot of the same items, but also some different ones too. So for starting builds, Guardian's Blessing is the obvious choice for supports. Then usually it's a case of tier 1 boots and potions similar to solo, however you usually don't get a health chalice in support. You can get health chalice, but it is a little bit weak in the mana sustain department if you do go for that. Personally, I prefer either 3 health and 3 mana pots, or Baron's Brew and 3 health pots. Take your pick in terms of your potions for what you need really. If you want more overall sustain or better mana sustain, you can pick up different things depending on what you need. For your boots, Reinforced Greaves are almost always what you want on Support Baron for the early defenses, and of course the CCR, which as I've mentioned before is super good on Baron. You could potentially get away with CDR boots as well for a more aggressive option, but personally I prefer the Reinforced Greaves. So for Support Baron, the typical aura support items are still worth building, but aren't always 100% necessary. Those being Sovereignty and Heart Ward. Personally I stay away from Thebes on Baron. But there's also other options such as Lotus Crown, which is a must on Baron support unless someone else on your team is going to get it. Genji's Guard also becomes a lot more valuable in support for the mana sustain since you don't have a constant blue buff like you do in solo, and the mana and CDR helps you spam abilities a lot more in support. Spirit Robe and Discord still apply as they did in solo as great general purpose defense items. Specifically, Spirit Robe is awesome as it fills out your CCR to the max 40% and also has the passive to deal with CC focus. But Discord is also amazing at doing a similar job, plus both provide CDR, which is amazing for Baron. Only Hunter's Garb is an item that's really hot right now, but might not necessarily be great in the future. But for right now, it's amazing for the mitigations, defenses, plus a little bit of mana sustain as well. Just be aware that it provides 20% CCR though, so this plus boots will cap you out and you want to avoid items like Spirit Robe at that point since you will overcap CCR. And finally, Pestilence and Megardian Mail can be worth pickup against heavy healing or auto attack comps respectively. Though you usually have more important items to build and solo should be grabbing these before you do, you can get them if you feel you need them. Alright, so onto that full build example for Support Baron. Start with Guardian's Blessing, Tier 1 Boots, Baron's Brew and 3 health potions with Shell as your relic. Finish boots into Reinforced Greaves, then get Sovereignty, Genji's Guard, Lotus Crown, Spirit Robe and Mantle of Discord, with Sprint as your second relic. This build gives 30% CDR, which is usually enough to keep you going, plenty of solid defenses including maxed out CCR, and some supportive capabilities in Lotus Crown and Sovereignty. As always, you can sub in any of the items from above to fit the current game. And finally, mid lane Baron. This is definitely the worst of the 3 roles since Baron works better tanky I think, but this is how I will build mid lane Baron. Start with Tier 2 Book and Baron's Brew, pretty simple. You then want to finish that book into Book of Thoth. After that, your boots are a similar situation to solo lane. Usually you want CDR boots since you get plenty of pen later on in the build, but you can grab Shoes of the Magi here as well if you want more early game damage. From there, for penetration, you usually want Spear of the Magus, but Spear of Desolation is decent too. Then you also might want Obsidian Shard against most teams that have a lot of tanks. Book of the Dead is nice for survivability if you're being focused on Baron. Soul Reaver is great for extra burst as it is in solo since Baron has 4 abilities that can proc it. Soul Gem is also similar to Soul Reaver, but personally I do prefer Reaver. Even E-Staff I think is viable on mid lane Baron. Chronos Pendant is also an option but not usually something I lean towards on Baron. And finally, Magi's Cloak and Mantle of Discord in my opinion are even worth a pickup on mid lane Baron since he does like to be tanky and avoid that CC. Alright, so onto that full build example. Start with Tier 2 Book, Baron's Brew and Beads. Finish the book into Book of Thoth, then get Shoes of Focus, Spear of the Magus, Book of the Dead, Soul Reaver, Mantle of Discord, with your second relic being Aegis. Alright, so with builds done, let's round out the guide with some tips and tricks to up your game on Baron. So firstly, you can squeeze out a little bit more effectiveness out of Baron's ultimate in the right scenario. If you know the enemy can't escape the pull, you can turn yourself away for a brief moment to delay the ability and keep the enemy CC'd for longer. Be careful when doing this though, as it's possible that enemies might escape if you try and do this. This can also be used to stop an enemy tank from blocking your ult, as I mentioned earlier, since it will end the ult early. Just turn away from them and try and pull the target you want instead. Prolonging the ultimate can often be a great way to avoid damage as well, since you get the 30% damage reduction while channeling. And also if someone tries to Aegis your ultimate and tries to run into it, turn away, wait for the Aegis to end and then turn back and just annihilate them. Also, when using Baron's 3-2-1 or 3-1-2 combo, you should wait for the snake to root the enemy before throwing your other abilities. This near guarantees that you'll hit them, and also if you have Spear of the Magus, it will increase your damage a little bit. Oh, and finally, it sounds dumb, but be sure to remind your teammates that Baron's Brew exists. You'd be surprised how many people buy 3 potions instead of Baron's Brew simply because they forgot they had a Baron on their team. So that's about it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this guide and learned something new about Baron. Let me know who you want me to cover next in this series, and check out all my other guides on the channel if you're new, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out, you nerds.